Hello, everyone, and welcome to Brama Talks, a webinar series sponsored by Brama Grodzka Teatr NN, or the Grodzka Gate NN Theater Center, which is a municipal institution in Lublin, Poland, committed to preserving the memory of Lublin's Jews. My name is Leora Tec, and it's my pleasure to welcome all of you, whether you're watching live or the recording. I am the special projects partner to Brama Grodzka Teatr NN. Today's program is entitled In Search of Books from Yeshivas Chachmei Lublin, and our guest is Piotr Nazaruk. Piotr is a researcher and educator at Brama Grodzka, and he has been involved in a lot of really interesting projects. He is a lover of Yiddish, and in fact, spent 2 summers at the EVO summer program in Yiddish, the intensive program. But today's discussion, I guess, doesn't really involve Yiddish. To start, Piotr, first of all, welcome. Thank you.
Hello, Leora, and hello, everyone.
Why don't we start by you giving us a background about Yeshivas Chachmei Lublin and its importance?
Sure. I will only mention that I have just returned from the town of Łęczna, which is a town like 20 kilometers from Lublin. And today we opened there in a municipal library a small exhibit together with the Jewish community of Lublin, the Jewish Lublin Foundation, and the Łęczna municipality about Yeshivas Chachmei Lublin, or Yeshivat Chachmei Lublin if you prefer, and its Łęczna connections. And I have good news for everyone interested in Łęczna. The Jewish cemetery in Łęczna, which is in a very poor condition, will be revitalized. The county and the owner of the cemetery made an agreement, and they will at least take care of the vegetation and clean the cemetery. So I'm bringing good news from Łęczna, but to jump into our today's topic, which is a fascinating, at least for me, a fascinating subject, the library of Yeshivas Chachmei Lublin. Many of you may have heard about the Lublin Yeshiva, may have seen the yeshiva while visiting Lublin, or just seeing images of it. Like, we have to remember that it was one of the greatest enterprises conducted by Jewish community of Poland in the 1930s, like almost just before the outbreak of the Second World War. The Jewish community of Lublin, together with Rabbi Meir Shapira, who was quite an interesting figure. Many of you may have heard about him as a famous rabbi, but he was also the very first Orthodox Jewish deputy to the Polish parliament, a very active member of Agudat Israel, influential figure, the initiator of the Daf Yomi Talmud studying method. So together with him, in the middle 1920s, they started building the largest yeshiva in the world, at least back then. Shapira's idea was to build a yeshiva like no other yeshiva before. Like before Lublin, before this yeshiva, they were mainly like small buildings, small rooms, without like any they were not supporting their students financially in most cases, or any other way. And Shapira's vision was to build a huge complex with dormitories, with kitchens, with modern bathrooms, which was like something wow back then in the interwar period. So to provide all the needs for the students, in most cases extremely talented, boys from various communities in Poland, yet coming from poor families, so they could focus on, studies, on Torah studies. And the Lublin Yeshiva was opened in 1930. It was built in 6 years, quite fast, thanks to donations from the entire Jewish world. Polish Jews, but also European and American Jews were donating, donated a small fortune, actually. So Meyer Shapira and his followers built the yeshiva in Lubartowska Street near the Jewish hospital. The land itself was also donated to the building community. So the idea was to establish the largest and the best Talmudic academy to prepare like the new rabbinical elite for Poland and surrounding countries. And of course, such a huge enterprise needed an equally huge, vast library. The idea of Rabbi Meyer Shapira was to collect at least 100,000 books. Here behind us, you can see him sitting in the main reading room of the Lublin Yeshiva. And although the yeshiva had certainly not amassed such a huge amount of books, because it existed for only 9 years, for sure they acquired, well, researchers say maybe 30, maybe 40,000 volumes. And the library of the Lublin Yeshiva was built in exactly the same way as the yeshiva itself. So thanks to donations from the Jewish world. Like they were establishing special committees around Poland, but also abroad, committees of volunteers who were collecting books from Jewish communities, from private people, from authors, from donators, and sending them to Lublin. There are press reports about such committees being established in huge places like Warsaw or like in New York, but also in small towns like Wolbrom, like Kielce. So, you know, not the largest urban centers you can imagine. Like I even remember reading like an article from a Łódź Yiddish newspaper claiming that the Orthodox Jewish youth of the city of Łódź like made this in a way like a public pledge that they will collect 10,000 books in just 1 month and, you know, send them to Lublin. Like, I'm not sure if they succeeded, but even if they didn't, you can feel almost the spirit, like this involvement of volunteers around Poland. So for sure, they collected one of the largest, if not the largest, Jewish religious library in Poland. The collection became famous even before the Second World War. However, after the war, it entered almost like a legendary period of its existence, mainly because the story, or maybe I should say legend, about its destruction. And actually the destruction of the Lublin Yeshiva, here depicted on artistic renderings, became almost like one of the most clear symbols of Nazi German atrocities against Jewish heritage. If you type Lublin Yeshiva library, you will find either popular articles or even scholarly articles claiming that the Lublin Yeshiva library was burned by the Germans in 1940 in the courtyard of the yeshiva. Like, some even claim that that a Jewish orchestra was like forced to play during this fire, which lasted for 20 or so hours. The main problem with this story is that it never happened. It is based only on one quote from a newspaper, a German newspaper that never existed. I spent hours, days trying to find the source of this story. Researchers who write about it claim that it was described by a German Nazi youth magazine called Die Deutsche Jugendzeitung, which means like roughly German youth magazine. And like the problem is, I'm laughing because the problem is that I was trying to find whether this that newspaper existed, and it seems that it had never existed. German National Library like remains silent about such a newspaper being published whenever. Like there was such a newspaper published in Wrocław or Breslau in the early 20th century, but like it lasted for only a few years, and certainly it was not that newspaper. So the actual source of this quote is a Hebrew language newspaper called Hatzofe. Please, our Hebrew speakers, sorry for my Hebrew pronunciation, but it was a Hebrew language newspaper being published in the British mandatory Palestine during the Second World War. And yes, there is such a quote there, a tiny little note claiming that the library was destroyed. However, it was published a year after the alleged fire. So the fire, according to that quote, happened in 1940, and they wrote about it in 1941, like a year later. And interestingly enough, the very same Hatzofe in 1942 published a completely different statement, claiming that the Germans actually looted the entire library, transferred it to the main Lublin library, which back then was turned into like state German library, and they even hired or forced a rabbi whose name was Aaron Lebvol. He was a graduate of the Lublin Yeshiva, and then he became an influential figure in the yeshiva. They forced him to prepare catalogs of thousands of books they stole from the yeshiva. And there are actually German documents issued during the war by the chief of that German state library in Lublin, stating that we are like very satisfied with the work of Aaron Lebvol, and if it's possible, we will keep him like a month, 2 months, 3 months longer so he can finish his work. And unfortunately, he was also killed in Belgrade. But like when I developed this interest in the Lublin Yeshiva library, it shortly became clear to me that this story about the destruction of the Lublin Yeshiva library is a fake. Like there are no photographs of it documenting it, only such artistic depictions. Like I imagine, like if I would like to destroy such a valuable library for propaganda reasons, I would document it. I would have documented like properly to use such documentations. So there's no proof that this library was actually ever destroyed. And on the contrary, there are documents created during the war and shortly after Lublin's liberation, claiming the complete opposite, claiming that the library was actually saved and rediscovered soon after the liberation of Lublin. Here behind us, you can see a few such documents. In the middle, there is a transcript of the Yiddish radio broadcast. In 1945, we had Yiddish radio in Lublin, which was mainly used to inform about surviving Jews who were in Lublin back then. On the left side, there's a bulletin of the Jewish press agency. It was like the very first Jewish newspaper being published in Poland. And on the right side, there's like an official report of activity of the Lublin Jewish committee. And in the middle, there's a quote from a news report published in 1945 by the Jewish Telegraphic Agency. And all of them claim exactly the same thing. It was revealed that the famous religious library of the Yeshivas Chachmei Lublin was discovered soon after Lublin was liberated in July of 1944. So, in the course of my research, I was able to determine what happened next. This entire collection of 30 or 40,000 volumes was in Lublin until 1946. Like, it was in Łopaciński Library, the main Lublin library in Narutowicza Street. It was under protection of the Jewish committee. Those of you, I'm not sure if you know what the Jewish committee was. It was like a Polish government sanctioned Jewish institution responsible for taking care of every needs of surviving Jewish population in Poland. It was established in Lublin, then moved to Warsaw. So it was in Warsaw, and in 1946, and this is based on an official report of the Lublin Committee, this entire collection was transferred to Warsaw. And many researchers actually suspected that that the collection survived and it was most probably sent somewhere, but they were not sure, like they couldn't find any proofs what exactly happened. So this document on the right is actually like vital regarding history of the Lublin Yeshiva, because it states clearly that they were transferred to Warsaw and given to the Jewish Historical Commission. Jewish Historical Commission was also a very important Jewish institution established here in Lublin. They were responsible for collecting the very first testimonies of Jewish survivors here in Lublin and surrounding areas, like months before Warsaw and other places in Poland were liberated. So they were transferred there. And then in 1946, the Jewish Historical Commission was joined with other institutions and turned into the Jewish Historical Institute, a famous institution which exists till today. It's one of the major like Jewish research institutions in Poland.
So could you tell us maybe how you first learned about this, legend, as you call it, and what piqued your interest to think maybe this isn't true?
So in Lublin, this is a famous story. Like if you're interested in Lublin's history and Lublin's Jewish heritage, you know the story of the library's destruction. But like I'm always suspicious. Like when I don't have like clear proof that something happened, I don't buy it. And with this story, it was exactly the same. Like those of you who know me, you know that I'm more interested in like secular Jewish life, Yiddish press, various like Bundist activities and so on. Like I can say that I was always like fascinated by the history of the yeshiva, but the history of its library, like the importance of its of this like intellectual heritage is something that I couldn't ignore. And actually, like you don't see Agata. Agata is behind the scenes. She's managing everything, but Agata is also like very vital to this story, because a few years ago, Agata and I were like office mates in Brama Grodzka. And I remember it was probably like June or July. It was extremely hot. Like these days we have extremely hot summers we have in Poland. So it was like afternoon. I was tired, because of the heat and because of like doing something like working. And often when I'm like devastated by surroundings and unpleasant conditions, I go to digital libraries and I check their Yiddish language sources.
As we all do.
As we all do, like you understand me. So I was with Agata was doing something like for sure working. She's not like she's a responsible person, so she was still working. I was bored, and I decided to check digital holdings of the Jewish Historical Institute. And as I said, usually I check like Yiddish language press in search of some criminal stories or like things like that. But for some reason, I decided to check their like digitized Hebrew prints. Like I don't understand Hebrew. I understand only like very very basic level. But for some reason, maybe the beauty of like the title pages like attracted my attention. And I sit there with Agata, and suddenly I say, Agata, listen, I see a stamp of the Lublin Yeshiva library on one of the books digitized by the Jewish Historical Institute. And then I see another one. And suddenly, like I ended the day with 130 books identified, books with Lublin Yeshiva stamps. And that was like really amazing because a few hours before, we knew only about like 5 surviving books from the Lublin Yeshiva library. They were discovered completely by chance in the early 2000s by Professors Monika Adamczyk-Garbowska and Adam Kopciowski, local scholars here from Lublin. So I knew about 5, and suddenly I have 130 something digitized by the Jewish Historical Institute. So it was a breakthrough for me. I understood immediately that the collection is there, like somewhere in the world, in Żych and probably in other institutions, there are such books. And then I started doing this provenance research, searching for books with such stamps, because this is the only way of recognizing that a book was once a part of the Lublin Yeshiva. And actually the fact that I don't understand Hebrew is a blessing in this case, because when I do this research, I'm not distracted by the books, by their content and so on, like sometimes by their beauty, but I can focus only on stamps, on like scanning books for such stamps. And to end this part of our presentation, I would like to tell you why you can find these days such books around the world. So in 1947, representatives of the Hebrew University came to Europe, to Poland, but also from other countries, and they were donated 200,000 books, Jewish books from all over Europe. Their goal was to reunite them with Israel. So they were also granted, who knows how many, a few thousand maybe, books from the original Lublin Yeshiva library that were in Warsaw back then. And you can recognize such books by such labels. Labels you can see behind me. It's in Yiddish and Hebrew. It states that this is a gift of Jewish books that were saved from the destruction and granted by the Central Jewish Library in Warsaw and Central Jewish Community and Jewish religious congregations in 1947. So, as I mentioned before, we knew about 5 books. These are those 5 books that we knew about years ago, and now we know almost about 1,000. identified in various libraries and institutions and yeshivas and synagogues as well around the world, in Poland, in Israel, in places like Herzog College, for example, in Beit Agnon in Jerusalem, in Yeshivat Haretzion, for example, but also in Yivo Institute, in Penn libraries, and also in private collections. So what I do together with Monika Tarajko, who's also from Brama Grodzka, those of you who participated our Lubliner reunion probably remember Monika. She was coordinating many of events, and with help of a few scholars, but our team is very modest, like in numbers, we search for such books, identify them, describe them, and our goal is to create like a comprehensive catalog and also like a digital library, you know, to in a way reunite this collection in Lublin in a digital form.
How do you search for them?
It's a laborious work. You can either search in digital libraries or in like physical, like in normal libraries. It looks more or less the same. You open a book, you check its title page, you check other pages in search of stamps. I showed you. That's the only way of finding relevant.
So the stamp isn't necessarily only in the title page. It might be somewhere in the
It can be on
middle.
various pages, like how do you call like pre-title pages? It can be there. It can be somewhere in the middle or in on the back of the book. So you have to be careful. You have to check. Well, maybe not every single page, but it's good to check more than just title page.
Interesting. And so you mentioned that these books come from many different countries. Is there like, is it different in terms of the way that you find them in different countries, or the willingness or reluctance to participate in the project based on country?
I would have to say that huge institutions such as the National Library of Israel, the Jewish Historical Institute, or other like huge institutions are harder to cooperate with. Like, I'm not saying that they are not willing, but you know, they are huge institutions. They have millions of books. They have limited resources. So it's like it takes much more time to convince them to commence such search or to like participate. It is much easier actually with smaller institutions or private individuals. In the course of last few years, I have received like dozens of emails from students of yeshivas in Israel, for example, or librarians, because like, you know, they are in contact with those books. They use them. So they can notice such stamps. And since they heard about my project, they often like contact me and send me scans or photographs of such books. So it's actually a great help. I don't have access to all the libraries and all the places I can imagine. Some of them are poorly accessible, do not have like digital libraries, only like you have to use physical books. Yeah, so it's much easier with such private individuals or smaller institutions.
And do they hear about it because there have been articles in the press, or because you do some sort of outreach to libraries, or word of mouth? Like
both. Thankfully, this project has been covered pretty well by various newspapers and media around the world, so it helps a lot. But we also like actively contact institutions. That's why, for example, we were able to determine that such books are in in Czech Republic, in Theresienstadt Museum. So, or in Penn libraries, for example. So yeah, we try both.
I think you have some kind of like interesting and not kind of, you have some interesting and emotional stories, particular stories. Can you tell
Yes,
us like
a few of them, a few, because like this is one part of this project, like this boring, laborious work I, Monica, and other researchers do, like it's sitting in front of PC and editing website or creating a catalog. However, thanks to this project, on a few occasions, like wonderful things happened surrounding the Lublin Yeshiva, and it all started, I think, almost exactly a year ago, just before Rosh Hashanah, a year ago. We were paid a visit in Lublin by a representative of Freie Universität Berlin, which is a Berlin-based university. Like I discovered on their website that they had 2 books from the Lublin Yeshiva. And in Germany, at least in Berlin, they have this policy of returning books to rightful owners. Like that's their goal. If they can, they return them. And actually, it was possible to like officially restitute 2 books from the original yeshiva library to the contemporary present-day Lublin Jewish community, and it happened 2 years ago. Sorry, not a year ago. 2 years ago, in September. And here in the photo you can see our guest Stefan Kummer from the Berlin University, like officially restoring 2 yeshiva books to its original place. The event happened in the Lublin Yeshiva, of course. And actually in Lublin media, it caused like a huge, like it was also well covered, but also it was like I've seen like hundreds and hundreds of comments and like reactions to this restitution of books from Germany. Like I'm not sure if everyone here is like know that the German subject is a very serious subject in Poland. Like still, the destruction caused by the German Nazis is like one of, I would say, like funding, like a very important part of post-war mythos of the Polish nation. So the fact that a German was bringing back 2 Jewish books to Lublin caused a huge stir in Lublin media. The thing is that Stefan Kummer, of course, he's a German scholar working in Berlin University, and he brought the books, but he's also a German Jew whose father was from Poland, and he actually fought the Nazis during the war, and was a prisoner of Majdanek concentration camp. So he was here both as a German and also as a Jew. So for him, it was like also a very emotional visit, just like for everyone else in the audience. But that's not all. Like even more happened. I think in December the same year, we were visited by Meyer Bulka, who I think is with us today. I hope he is. Meyer Bulka is an Israeli citizen, quite a known figure, and I met him at some point because I was trying to find, like, to get contacts to like Israeli media. I was trying to let them know that we have this project and maybe they could write about it. And I think Meyer like developed this interest in our project, and actually in December of 2023 he bought 3 books original books from Lublin Yeshiva, and he brought them here to Lublin, donated them to the yeshiva and to the Jewish community of Lublin. So that was also like a wonderful opportunity, well, to meet, but also to have additional books. So we started having 5 books. Then Stefan Kummer brought 2. Meyer Bulka brought 3. So in just 1 year, we like doubled the number.
Yeah.
That's not the end, because the same Meyer Bulka, who you see here, his friend Yehuda Breyer is like the founder and CEO of an Israeli auction house called Tiferet. There are plenty of such auction houses in Lublin, and Meyer Bulka was able to convince his friend, the founder and CEO of that auction house, to cooperate with him and with Israeli groups visiting Lublin, so that they would bring original Lublin Yeshiva books back to the yeshiva, to its original place where they were meant to be. So this summer, it was one of the most like active summer in my life. We were visited by plenty of groups from Israel coming with original yeshiva books. So on the left, you can see me with Yaki Gantz. He was a head of a group of like employees of the Bezek telecommunications company, one of the largest, from what I understand, in Israel. A huge group who brought this book. Around the same time, Jeffrey Sachs, who is the like director of research in Beit Agnon, or Agnon House Museum in Jerusalem, discovered that they also had a book with such a stamp. So he brought me a copy. He's holding a copy of that book when he visited Lublin with his group. Then you can see youth groups coming to Lublin. The man holding this huge Talmudic tractate is Idan Ochotowski. He headed a school group from school called Ulpena Tveria, group of girls, and they also brought so they brought a book with them, and I had a chance to meet and tell them story of the yeshiva, and also in cooperation with Eden, surprised them that they actually had such a valuable book with them, and they were restoring them to its original site. On the right, you can see another group headed by Gilad Samuel. It's a school called Ulpenat Givat Shmuel. They brought tiny little book with them, much smaller than the one Eden brought. Another photo shows a school group headed by Dani Hirschberg. They also brought a book with them, and I always, like, I was meeting with them and was giving them a short story of the yeshiva, of its library, of its alleged destruction. In reality, the fact that it was scattered around the world. So it was actually very, very a great opportunity. We are in Grodzka Gate, we are educators. So it was one of the best opportunities to actually educate about our Lublin Jewish heritage.
Is there any tension between the idea of these books being where they came from in the yeshiva in Lublin in Poland versus being where they were brought? You know, you showed us this document or plate or whatever from 1947 where they were brought, you know, for safety, sort of. So is there any tension between those two things?
There is such a tension. Well, usually people, like, when I had those youth groups, they were like, "Oh, this is amazing," and like they were extremely happy that they actually participated in such events. I often share, like on my Twitter or X account, I share things about the Lublin Yeshiva and such returns. I also shared posts about those returns, and like the comments were various. Like some people actually were saying, like, "Hello, like the books, like they belong to like students in yeshivas, they should be there. We shouldn't give anything back to Poland. Like, what's going on here?" And well, first of all, they were, the yeshiva is owned and used by the Jewish community of Lublin, small but existing community. But also, like, unfortunately, the fact is that in many cases, the books that are returning are not books used by any students of yeshivas. Like they use like modern editions in most cases of such books. They are books that are being sold on, like you can buy them on the antiquarian auctions. So yes, there are like sometimes such tensions do happen, but if I can, I try to like give more context, and usually it's possible to resolve such tensions.
Yeah. Before we open it up for questions, I want to ask you if there's more that you want to share, but I also want to remind people that, please put your questions in the chat.
So there are a few more things, because a lot has happened in 2024. In April, I was contacted by a German lady from Chemnitz. It's in Saxony, near the Polish border. She contacted me stating that she saw a video of mine when I gave the where I gave the story of the Lublin Yeshiva. And although she didn't have any yeshiva books, she had something else that maybe I would have found interesting. And she told me that she had a collection of a few dozen original postcards addressed, like a collection of letters on postcards addressed to the Lublin Yeshiva, which were looted from Lublin by her own grandfather, who was a Nazi soldier, a German Nazi soldier back then. During the war, he was stationed in Lublin. And the thing is that he looted them not necessarily because he wanted to loot something Jewish, but because since he was a child, he was basically crazy about postcards and postal stamps. Like his mother worked in some huge factory. They had lots of like business letters coming there, and he, as a child, like developed this fascination with stamps. So when he was in Lublin, when he was stationed in Lublin as a soldier, he saw like a pile of trash near the yeshiva, and he spotted postal stamps on some documents. So he just took it. He looted them, of course, but ironically, that's how this correspondence survived. So in April, we were visited by Carla McCabe. She's a German granddaughter of that Nazi soldier who like officially returned this entire collection of letters. In most cases, letters about like business matters, like fundraising for the yeshiva or organizing book collecting, things like that. Fascinating letters, in most cases in Hebrew. They were officially like given to the state archives in Lublin, which is the best place to like safely keep such documents. They are also available, like publicly available, in both the archive and and in the internet. Also in June, when there was 100th anniversary of the Yeshiva Cornerstone, we organized a exhibit in the yeshiva. By we, I mean Grodzka Gate people plus the Jewish community of Lublin. We built this like old-fashioned
card catalog
with cards, catalog cards about identified books from the Lublin Yeshiva. So almost 1,000 cards are inside. Plus, we also organized those like display cases where the books discovered in the 2000s and brought by Meyer Bulka and by returned thanks to Yehuda Breyer and others can be like displayed in the yeshiva. It was a nice event during which the elders of the Jewish community of Lublin were like stamping those catalog cards of books that were in the yeshiva. So like also a wonderful opportunity, well, for them to meet and participate in something something really important. I would like to this will be the end of my presentation. Then we can jump into questions. But this is something that happened a few months ago. I'm like sitting here with Monika Tarajko, and believe me or not, we are here in the Higher Theological Catholic Seminary in the city of Włocławek, north of Warsaw. We went there with Monika and with Professor Andrzej Trzciński, and we went there because we had a clue that there is a slight chance that they might have books from the Lublin Yeshiva library, and they did. Like we discovered two after like going through hundreds of them. We discovered two with Lublin stamps. One of them was actually a book by famous Lublin Rabbi Yehuda Leib Eiger, printed in Lublin, written in Lublin, and which was held by the Lublin Yeshiva for a few years. So even in such exotic places, exotic from the perspective of like Jewish heritage, you can find books from the Lublin Yeshiva.
But that book that you just mentioned, for example, does that remain in that library, or did they return it to Lublin?
For now, it remains there. We will see. Maybe it will be possible to bring it back to Lublin as well.
Okay, thank you, Piotr. That was so interesting. Let me turn now to questions from our guests. Okay, Lynn Feldman says, you mentioned that there were Nazi reports about the catalog. Was this just part of the article in Hatzofeh paper, or are these documents that you have seen?
No, they were actually they actually hired Rabbi Aaron Level to catalog the books, and there are like documents issued by the Germans in Lublin during the war, explicitly stating that they hired that rabbi to make such catalogs.
Okay.
But Hatzofeh also mentioned that. They did not mention the name of the rabbi who was making catalogs, but they mentioned the fact.
Mm-hmm. Okay, someone else is asking about in which archive. I guess they were found in many different, but maybe they're talking about the Jewish Historical Institute, I guess.
Mainly in the Jewish Historical Institute, because they have most of documents created by the Lublin Jewish community. Lublin Jewish Committee, sorry, they went to the Jewish Historical Institute.
Okay, and then she continues, how has the role of the archive transformed your project in what many people are calling the post-truth era amidst disinformation. Maybe this is a larger question about the importance of archives and preservation of original documentation.
Well, they brought us proofs that actually we are not hunting ghosts, but we are hunting books that really survived. And if something happened with this collection, it happened after those documents were created.
Yeah, it was when you were talking at the beginning about the legend of the burning, I was thinking that today such a legend or alternative fact could be spread extremely quickly, you know? Okay, then we have, oh, thank you. Michael Gillis says the first page of the book where the stamp may be found is called the frontispiece.
Yeah.
So thanks for that. Okay, the next question is the collection, when it arrived in Warsaw at the Jewish Historical Institute, were they not cataloged? And then she follows it up with the books that were gifted to the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Was there any kind of documentation on which books were donated to them?
So regarding the Jewish Historical Institute, they were cataloged, but rarely, very rarely, libraries put information in their catalogs or wherever about like previous owners. They do not do provenance research. Like only recently, libraries started actually looking inside their books in their collections and checking the stamps, because like you can learn much from the stamps, like you know who was the owner, who then like bought the book. Like you can determine the fate of like a life of a book thanks to stamps. So I would guess that they were simply ignored. Like you know they like today in the Jewish Historical Institute they have I don't know how many, like 90,000 books, 400,000 books, who knows. It's a huge collection. In the National Library of Israel they have probably millions from various sources, and they have limited resources, limited personnel.
Right. Yeah.
It's something for not for librarians but for researchers to do such a research.
Yeah, one thing is to accept materials, but then they also have to have funding and staff in order to properly catalog those materials.
They have books. Someone is like requesting books, so they are occupied with other tasks. So like I like fully understand the librarians. Unfortunately, I understand them. Like there is, I would like. I would be glad if someone did this before and everything was like tagged and easily accessible. Like, but unfortunately, the reality is different.
Yeah. So we have a question. What are you hoping people understand from the digital project?
Well, first of all, this is something like you can see this digital library project on various levels. First of all, it's a like you know this is like a huge part of Lublin's Jewish heritage, and Lublin was and this heritage is no longer in Lublin, and probably it will never, like this entire it will be impossible to reunite this book collection physically in Lublin. Like maybe we will have like 100 books, maybe 1,000 one day in Lublin from the original Yeshiva library, but certainly not 40,000 books. Like this collection is scattered, books are owned by various institutions. So the only possible way to bring it back to Lublin is to reunite them digitally, like in its mass. Secondly, it is something for scholars, because, for example, we can when we have the books cataloged or digitized, we can make research about the library, like what was there, what kind of books they were using, what was the like curriculum of the yeshiva, what was the spiritual landscape, I would say, like of of pure Polish religious Jewish communities. It is also for those who do not understand either Yiddish or Hebrew, are just like commoners from Lublin. They can at least see the beauty of such books. They can, it might be like the very first contact with a Jewish book for them. Today, when I was in Łęczna with Monica, we had a group of like local Łęczna school kids. You know, like schools always bring kids to such events. And we had Hebrew and Yiddish books with us, especially for them, you know, to show them for the very first time, probably in their life, how a Hebrew language or Yiddish language book looks like. Like for many Poles, this is not obvious that you open it and read from right to left, etc. So it's, you know, it's
yeah, and they're really interested. I can attest to this from meeting with kids groups, and I was surprised when I was in Brama Grodzka that they would be interested in, you know, some about learning about Hanukkah or something, but they really are, right? They're
yeah.
Okay, so another question. Did you ever survey the large and uncatalogued mass of books which was in the Nozick Synagogue in Warsaw as late as the 1990s?
I know that such a book collection is still in somewhere in Warsaw. However, like the access is limited, I think, and this is something for the future.
Mayor Bulka is here, as he noted, and he added a comment. My idea was to return the books to the yeshiva because that is their original place. Anyone who owns a book today is actually complicit in the crime of the Germans. Interesting. And he asks a question. After the books were moved to the Jewish Historical Institute, what happened next? A few thousand went to Hebrew University, but what about the others? How did they end up all over the world? And I think that's our last question.
Many of them are still held by the National Library of Israel. When they had like doubled copies, they donated them to many like yeshivas, smaller libraries. The largest chunk went to the Central Rabbinical Library of Israel, which was located in Heichal Shlomo building. And unfortunately, in the early 1990s, the library at Heichal Shlomo was liquidated, and thousands of books were just well thrown away and given to antiquarians. So that's how thousands of them ended up in private hands, in private collections. So that's because I saw a comment here that that the fact that 15 or 20 books are in a yeshiva, which is mainly used as a hotel, is in a way a continuation of Nazi goal. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's like a good way of putting this. They are owned and used by the Lublin Jewish community. Of course, we do not have yeshiva students in Lublin anymore, but at least we can see we can have part of Lublin's lost Jewish heritage in Lublin back. And like as I said, most of them were like thrown away in the early 1990s from Heichal Shlomo. They were not given to like Israeli yeshiva students. They use in most cases modern prints, like they don't use books from the 19th century because they are in poor shape. They use modern editions of the same titles.
Unfortunately, we don't have time to get to all the questions because we want to end on time. So Piotr, thank you so much for this fascinating discussion. I'm sure we could probably go on for another hour. hopefully you'll come back with another project or continuation. Thank you also to Monica Taraiko, who I know works closely with you on this project. Thank you to Agata, who you mentioned is doing everything behind the scenes, my partner in crime. And lastly, thank you to all of you who are attending today or watching later. If you do not yet receive the Brama Grodzka newsletter, I think Agata will put the link to the English language homepage in the chat, and on that page you can sign up for that. And if you are already signed up, you should have received a link to a survey, because we want to know what kind of programming you're interested in. So please take a few minutes to fill out that survey so we can better serve you. And thank you very much. See you next time. And Chag Sameach, because it's Rosh Hashanah soon. So have a sweet new year, hopefully a peaceful new year. Bye, everyone.